Okay, so we have a group of questions from the audience, but first of all, if y'all would take a few minutes to introduce yourselves and say how many children you have, how long have you been in the Classical Conversations program, maybe how long have you been homeschooling, what are your ages of your children, that kind of stuff, just to give everybody a little bit more background on each of you.
My name is Janine Jones. I have the two boys on the end that were up there. We have been in Classical Conversations for 3 years now. My oldest one started in Challenge B. We were classically educating before that. CC was the answer to high school for me. We're on the East Plano campus, and what else did you ask me to say? I do direct Challenge. I've directed Challenge 2 last year, and we're moving to Challenge 3 this coming year. Oh, and I have Jonathan.
Yeah.
Jonathan is he's going to be my fully classically educated through CC child. I'm so excited. The boys tell him he's going to be a genius, so we'll see, because he's quite a different personality from my other two.
And so what is he going into this next year?
Jonathan will, he will be doing his 3rd year of Essentials and the 3rd cycle of Foundations, and then we will see next year how this goes, because age-wise he's a September, so he could go to A next year, the way his birthday falls, but we'll evaluate that at the end of the year. He thinks he's ready, but we'll see.
All right, Farrell.
My name is Farrell Chapman. I have Kyle, who was up here in the green shirt, who is going into Challenge 1, he's 15. I have a daughter, Carson, who's 13 and going into Challenge B, so they are boom, boom, right behind each other in school, even though they're almost 2 years apart. Kyle is a summer birthday. We started out in public school, so he went to kindergarten at age 6. He was home, of course, before then. And when Carson was finishing 2nd grade, he was finishing 3rd grade, I felt surprisingly and disturbingly the Lord calling me to homeschool them. And so here I am. One of those things I always admired in other people and never thought I would do. So it's been 5 years now that we've been home, 3 years in CC, and my kids are on the East Plano campus with their kids.
And y'all know I'm Colleen Robichaud. I have 3 daughters, 16, 14, and 8. And we've always classically educated. The last 6 years have been with CC. And we are going into Challenge 3, going into Challenge 1. And then Lillian is still in just the Foundations program. I guess this will be my 13th year to homeschool. And yeah.
Okay, we're ready to get the questions.
Okay, question number 1. What counsel would you give a family who's about to transition from Foundations to Challenge?
That's automatic. A transition from Foundations to Challenge.
What advice?
First of all, take a deep breath. It's not as bad as it sounds. And thinking back on looking at my children, especially, I've only had one that has gone through A, but a world of difference that I saw in that child coming out. He did 1 year of Essentials and then going into A. And you have to look at your child, and it's a maturity, it's a learning process. They won't look the same at the beginning of A as they look at the end of A. And don't be afraid of the workload, and it is enough. Don't let anyone tell you that it's not enough, because it is enough. And remember, it's a training process. It's not all about the academics. It's about teaching your children life skills. And I think that's the hardest thing maybe to understand for some parents. We look just at the academic part of it, and I was pleasantly surprised at how I saw my child mature. And when he was talking about the scheduling, I wouldn't have thought that my child would be able to figure out his own schedule, because I did that up until he was in A. I wrote everything out for him. He had a checklist, and now he does everything. I give him the challenge guide, and I said, make out your week, and he's able to do that. So, so I'm probably talking more, but that's what I would say. You want everybody to
Colleen, do you want to add anything to that?
I agree with everything Janine said. I really view Challenge A as a learning year for both of my kids, them learning to do on their own. At the same time, I found myself having to be very careful that I didn't completely walk away. Both of my kids still have things in Challenge A they've struggled with, and both of them I have discovered that in those areas I probably walked away a little bit too much. And I had to come back in the second semester and be more attentive in the areas where they were struggling. I think my daughter especially suffers because I tend to work very hard to keep up with Kyle where he is so that I can understand what he's doing, and because I know she's coming behind, but then my tendency is to kind of leave her to do her own thing because I'm trying to figure out what's going on with what he's doing. So that's where I have to guard myself.
Yeah, I think it's very important that you understand that as a homeschool mom, you need to, as much as possible, stay with that oldest child in their studies. There's going to come a day, I've met that day, where your child is going to exceed you in what they know. Tally is beyond me in Latin. She is beyond me in her reading. She is far more well-read than I am. And so there's going to come a day, but you do your best to stay with them as long as possible. I would also encourage you that the model of challenge does not look like anything you've probably done before, and that's why a lot of families end up leaving. They feel like the science is not adequate, something is lacking, something's not adequate, and not to insult or presume that I know what they're thinking, but I think it's because of that bringing out of what we know and really embracing the new model and trusting the model. The model is brilliant, and I think if you don't look at our kids, if you look at Lee Borton's sons and their success and the kids that have graduated CC, there's plenty online that you can read about. But I would say just don't check out. Don't check out. The kids are going to become self-managed. They really are. But don't check out. You need to stay on top of their grading, stay on top of what they're doing. You need to inspect what you're expecting.
That's good. You want to keep the mic. I'll try to talk really loudly. So the next question really hinges on that. Like, someone wants to know, how much time are you really spending, like, learning Latin, reading the same literature so you can have the conversations? So, I mean, I liked what you said about at some point they're just going to, blow through it much faster than you can. But how much time are you investing in trying to keep up with them and trying to help them?
Do you want every one of us to answer every time?
You know what? How about whoever feels like they really have something to share to grab it and then jump in if you have anything?
I find that I spend a lot of time, honestly, because languages are not a gift for me. So for me to keep up with my kids in Latin takes a lot of effort on my part. Kyle has far exceeded me in Latin because he has a gift for languages that I do not have. So it's much harder. And when I sit down to try and do Latin with him, frankly, I hold him back. Whereas with my daughter, she and I are able to work through it together because both of us struggle more. But particularly the Latin, the logic and Challenge B, I have tried to keep up with. I do read all the books that they read, literature, and then also like the science, the apologetics. I read all of those because I want to know what they're learning, and I do want to be able to talk to them about it. And when they do the lost tools of writing, the Andy charts, we were talking about that this week, and they are struggling with coming up with the A's and the N's and the I's, I can't help them if I haven't read the books. So I do read all.
Okay, I'm a nerd, so I'll preface that. I like to learn, so I feel like I'm getting an education with my children. So I probably spend a lot more time than I should. But I do read, but part of that too is I'm a director, so I'm preparing for that as well. But prior to that, I read all the literature. My children, we were doing Latin before we came into CC, so I have learned Latin with them, although they do much better at it than I do. Something about their young brain cells. The math, I love math and I love science, so I do it with them. If I don't though, the joy I find though is asking my kids to tell me what they've learned or explain something to me. Maybe I'll just open the science book or math book and pick out something and say, hey, can you explain to me how you did this? Because they say they did it. So they're teaching me something. And so I get joy out of my kids teaching me something.
Okay, so this is a well-trained mind question. So for those of you that who loves well-trained mind? Okay, all right, so how well do you think the recommended curriculum fits in with the CC model? The reading suggestions, the writing, the grammar, etc.?
At the well-trained.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's basically what we did before coming into CC, and it was a nice transition. I thought it prepared us well, especially with the history. We've read the story of the world. My youngest one, we still read the story of the world. That's what we do for our history. It's nice to see the correlation when he's singing the history song, and I love it when he comes and says, "Hey, Mom, I read about that. That's on our timeline, and I just read about that in my story of the world." I think it helped my kids for the high school years when you don't see that history textbook, but when they've had the foundation of reading the story of the world or whatever history text when they're younger, it gives them that foundation so they know when they're reading that literature and they read the historical time period that it's in, they know something about what's going on. So I think it's a good fit.
I agree completely with what Janine said, and my kids, I think Kyle referenced, reading history now, because during the summer, I pick one of the Story of the World books, and they read it through the summer. And he had read them before, but he gets more out of them now, because he's had the geography, he's read some of the literature that refer to those time periods, and so he's getting things out of them now that he did not get before. It's just reinforcing.
That's good. That's excellent. That's also the integration. Like we're seeing the integration challenge already just through asking the kids. We're seeing the history and the geography, and we're seeing the Latin and the science. And so y'all need to see that in our kids. It's not being lost on our kids. Maybe it's my mother. And so it's not getting lost on our kids. But Story of the World. This is a mistake that I made when I came into CC. I was doing well-trained mind. I was doing everything Susan Weisbauer told me to do, because that's what I do. I told you already, I trust these people, so I do it. And what happened is I didn't let go of anything, and I overburdened myself. And so when you come into the CC world, trust your directors and the model when they tell you really just need a math program and a reading program, like a learn to read program, and spelling, But don't try to do everything that Susan Weisbauer is telling you, because that is a full curriculum in itself. But the Story of the World is a beautiful marriage to CC, and so that's what I would just say. Don't try to do all of the well-trained mind if you're coming into CC. You need to choose.
Okay. And the first language lessons, that's good to prepare you.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, Susan Weisbauer's got great teach your kids to read programs, the first language lessons, first and second grade, and then the ordinary parents method of teaching your child, something like that. But yeah.
Good. Okay. So this is not necessarily an educational one, but a parent one. Okay, so I hear a lot that you should let your children go into public school by high school or to high school so that they can be exposed to the world while they are still at your house. So that way you can guide them through the chaos as opposed to them figuring it out on their own when they're in college. Any thoughts on that?
I'm going to be very quick on this because I'm going to get off on a soapbox. Quickly, I will say, I know, our children are in public school until like 3 or 4 in the afternoon, and they come home and do schoolwork, and then they might have some kind of extracurricular activity that they're doing. That leaves you, then you've got dinner, and that leaves you about an hour in the evening to redeem all this time that they're talking about. We're supposed to, walk with them through the chaos. I don't know when you're supposed to walk through them with the chaos, if that's the plan.
I've got to play in chaos without public school. Because we do still live in the world. We go to church. My kids do other activities. They're around different kinds of people. Certainly our CC community, these ladies, except they're not perfect. I mean, there are kids there and my kid is sometimes a very hard one to deal with. You're still learning to deal with other personalities in that environment. So I don't really feel like that's an issue.
I'll just say, tagging on what they say, I think what we do in keeping them out is more real world. They're learning more. I think just seeing how life is in general and how we deal with the day-to-day. We're very open with our kids. We talk about drugs, we talk about drinking, we talk about relationships with girls, all that kind of stuff. So I think it's more real world rather than what they would see. And it doesn't necessarily mean that if your child is in high school and they're involved in that, you may not know that. Right now, I know what my kids are involved in. So if I send them out, I have a communication with my sons, which I value tremendously as a mom to a 16, 14, and 10-year-old. My boys will talk to me and they'll talk to their dad. And I don't know if they would have that if we didn't have that closeness as a family. They may not open to us. They may not ask us the questions if they go in a public school setting.
And one more thing, like, just speaking to the whole family unit, I think, we were talking about earlier about what are we doing to raise our kids to walk with the Lord Jesus, the way the Lord Jesus wants us to walk versus how we're raising our kids to walk with the Lord Jesus, the way our culture tells us to walk. I think the church is doing a great job splitting up our families, pulling us apart into all these different activities.
All right, that's a hard question.
It's a hard one to answer.
It's a hard one to answer, yes.
It's hard to answer honestly and
Right.
not offend someone.
Right. Okay, so this one, I think the challenge students answered this one a little bit, but it says share how you've seen the memory work and foundations and the essentials program pay off during the challenge years. So y'all hit some big, hit this hard and foundations.
Well, I was hoping Tally would share this. It's funny when you stick a microphone in Tally, she's all goofy and silly. She's it from her dad. So I sent her in a challenge. So I sent her in challenge A. We're gonna ride right over that. So I sent her in challenge A, and we struggled with math greatly. And she had about a year and a half, and then we moved to Israel. So she never did fully memorize anything in foundation, but she loved it. So we came back. She did challenge A. Math was really, really difficult for her. So we spent that summer. We always redo our math in summertime. So instead of redoing our math curriculum that summer, she memorized all of the foundations math facts. And she aced math the next year, and it's been easy for her ever since. Has she done A's, straight A's all the way through? No. But she has done amazingly well in her math, just speaking on math alone.
My voice didn't do foundation.
Yeah,
that's true.
Okay. Okay.
Oh, you know what? I can
No,
add.
well, I do have some.
Oh, you took John.
But
You know what's exciting is Tally will holler at me. Tally, the reason Tally is taking so long to do her schoolwork because so much of it is she gets on these rabbit trails and starts reading about St. Augustine or something, and I love that, and I'm going to let her do that as much as she wants to do it. I'll have to have a talk with her boss when she grows up, but this is the thing, they start seeing what Tally has experienced, and I guarantee Caleb would have seen it, and I'm sure Kyle has seen it, and he's going to see it even more in 1 and 2. But they start seeing these things repeating in the challenge program. Oh my word, and that's what Tally was saying, how, Celine Lillian is looking at all these artists, and Tally's going to look over her shoulder oh, but did you know this about him? And so it's just seeing how the Bible talks about we move precept upon precept, line upon line, comparing scripture to scripture. I'm telling you, the CC program used that as a model. And so it's precept upon precept, line upon line. We're building, we're hanging things on pegs.
Okay, this is a two-part question. Okay, what hooked you to the classical model? What was it that you were that is what we're doing? And then, what was your biggest concern going in that you feel like you've overcome? So what hooked you?
The classical
The
model.
classical
model. So
Reading.
what hooked you?
Reading was my biggest obstacle that I had to overcome, and the classical model because so many great leaders came out of it.
So what hooked you and your biggest concern that you had going in that you feel like you've overcome?
Well, I homeschooled Caleb, kindergarten, put him in school 1st grade. So he and Joshua Caleb went 1st grade, 2nd grade. In the middle of 3rd grade, I would pick the child up from school and he would be in tears because he kept asking me why he had to learn the same thing over and over again. And I didn't know what he was talking about. And then come to find out it was the tax test. And that's all they were doing was drilling him for this test, which he made 100 on. So that proved something to me. But anyway, so at that point I started thinking maybe I need to bring him home again. We were transferred to Georgia. When I went to Georgia, I started homeschooling again. We did K-12, which is an all-inclusive curriculum. I didn't like it because I was stuck to somebody else's thing, and I kind of like to do things my own way. And a friend of mine gave me the Susan Wise Bowers book to read, and I remember sitting there reading that book, literally crying, thinking this is how I want my kids to learn. I want them to learn how to think on their own. I don't want them to be told what they need to think. It truly, to me, was the way that God made us. The Trivium was the way that God made us to learn. And I saw it more as the biblical way of learning and how I wanted them to learn to read and understand Scripture. So I thought it worked that way, God's way, that it would work academically as well. And so then we did that, and then I was introduced to CC on the East Coast, and then we moved back to Texas, and luckily they were started here because they were just starting in this area at the time. So that was the second slide. Okay.
So your biggest challenge that you feel like, what did you think was going to be the biggest obstacle, or what was the biggest obstacle going in?
Into CC
Into
or
just classical education?
Classical education. I'm very organized, and I had to do everything, so I spent a lot of time just trying to, I had Susan Wasbauer's book, so I felt like I had to do every single thing in that book, and I didn't. I didn't have to do every single thing in that book. So it was just wrapping my head around what exactly I needed to do, because I wanted to do everything in there, but that's not what I needed to do. So that was probably the biggest obstacle for me, was learning time management.
I'm probably going to speak more to the second half of that question than the first half, because for me it was just that I picked up the well-trained mind and it made sense to me. There wasn't any big aha moment, it just made sense to me. The biggest challenge for me was transitioning my kids from public school and what that looked like to bringing them home, because at that point I had not found CC, so I was just doing it by myself. And really making it more of a homeschool than just doing public school at home, and trusting myself to be able to teach them. That was my struggle, was having faith that the Lord would equip me with what they needed to do. And that, frankly, has just taken a lot of prayer and time. Time in watching them grow and seeing it work, and growing myself in seeing that I can walk them through this. The Lord has equipped me to be their teachers.
Okay, Janine, this next question is to you. How does Essentials look for your youngest while you're directing Challenge? How do you do that?
How does Essentials look? He has a good foundation, because I started him actually really early with first language lessons. So he had all of basically the memory work down. And we focused the first year. He started Essentials young, and I did have 1 year with him, which was nice to be in there with him 1 year, and we just focused on memorizing the 112 sentence classifications. And I felt like if I had that down with him, then I could step away the next year, because that was a struggle with me, trying to decide if I was going to direct Challenge and then leave him alone in Foundations in Essentials. There's also some great moms in there that have adopted him. I call them his stepmoms, and they're very good to keep him, first of all, focused and not entertaining the class, because he likes to do that. And then we have great tutors and everything. So I just take the Essentials guide, and we work on the sentences, and also have him tell me what they're doing. And a lot of times he'll correct me. He'll say, "No, Miss Edgeworth said to do it this way." And
so you've got a lot of support behind you.
I've got a lot of support, and I made it that way. I picked out moms and went to the Debbie Centaur, who's the director. I wanted him in her class because she was experienced. I feel more comfortable just letting, I think he has got a good basis of it now. But probably the most time I spent with him was the writing, the IEW, just working with that with him. So,
okay.
That answered that.
Okay, so this one is up for grabs. Please talk about how you have used discipline to keep them on track, and encouragement to motivate them. So discipline to keep them on track, encouragement. How do you keep them motivated? So any thoughts on either of those?
Mine's easy. I have boys. If you don't get your work done, you don't get free time. No Legos.
We're pretty much the same. If you can't come and show me that you have completed your work, then no, you can't get on the Xbox, or no, you can't do whatever. It's just part of it. As far as the encouragement, just say that I think the attitude I wake up with in the morning affects how they view it. If I wake up and I'm having a hard day, and it's a struggle for me to get to the table to start with them, they feed on that. And if I come, at least with a positive attitude, doesn't mean they're going to have one necessarily, but it goes a long way towards getting them where they need to be.
Yeah, I think that's it. I think we're modeling, I think it all I think a lot of it has to do with how are we coming to it. just what you said. I think a lot of moms really miss an opportunity when they're grumpy and when they're like, oh, I can't stand doing this. I mean, some moms really showed on the outside how much this really is hard. I don't think it's wrong for your kids to see how hard it is. I think we need to let them know that we're not afraid to do hard things. And so when we are struggling, it's very good for us to, it's been very good for me to say that out loud to my kids. But I think when I show my kids, when I have shown my kids how much I love to learn, you know, they have a dad who loves to learn, I think that's so important that we're modeling how much fun learning is. And it goes back to brainwashing. It goes back to we really are creating an environment that we want them to mimic. They're mimicking whatever we do, so we might as well make it something that looks great and that's good for them.
I have one more thing on that. It's just thinking about this, that at this point, so much of the encouragement that my kids get, so much of their drive, I think also comes from their classmates.
Yeah.
Because they know they're going to have to walk in on Monday with what they've done and haven't done.
Yeah.
And they're driven by that desire to keep up with their classmates, and there's a little bit of friendly competition there, which is a good
Yeah,
thing.
that's true.
Okay, this one might relate to the boy moms more, but it says, if you have boys, how do you help tame the video game TV monster?
Ooh, we really struggled with that. We still struggle with that. I mean, I have a limit on the amount of screen time he's allowed to have. For a long time, my husband has loosened up on this. He didn't have screens Monday through Thursday. Screens were only a Friday, Saturday, and late in the afternoon on Sunday things for him. That's changed a little bit recently. He's been given a little more freedom. He's older now. And frankly, I would like to be more diligent with it than I am, but he invested himself with some birthday money in an iPod, and that is, I found it harder to control than the big things that are out in the middle of my house, right? So I don't have a great answer on that.
I would have never let them in if it had been up to me.
But we're married to boys.
Yes.
But we're married to boys. We do put limits on them. On ours, there's one day a week where we give them an afternoon where they have free play on them. It works and it doesn't work. I can tell when they've had too much, and the older they get, I think the easier it is to help them to understand, and we talk through, you know, you're probably grumpy because you've been sitting in front of that for too long. And so I think that's helped because now they will discipline themselves. Before that, we would do timers. I would set a timer, and you have 30 minutes. When the timer goes off, if you don't turn it off, then you lose your privilege the next time of playing. Ours is more video games, probably. We don't have that big of an issue with TV just because we're not big TV other than sports. I like baseball, and my husband likes football, but sports probably, but not TV shows. We really don't watch that much TV. We just gave in this past year with the iPhones for my older two. We limit them, but for my middle one, who's very social, I struggle with this because he loves his friends. He would go to a friend's house every single day. Her son's one of them. It's given him an avenue to talk to his friends. He FaceTimes with them and texts them, and you know, I monitor that and everything's good, but so I kind of started like, well, at least he's getting to talk to his buddies, and so.
Oh, and I did hear this recently. I'm thinking about implementing it. It was a guy who said that every time your child is on a screen, the rule should be that as soon as they're off, they should have to go outside and do something physical for at least 15 minutes. Walk the dog, jump on the trampoline, ride the bike, because that does kind of get the ick of that screen out of them. And I think that's true. It's just hard when it's
Yeah, and we've done that. We usually, they have to go outside.
Can I say that one thing about girls in that sense? Because I think those of us who have girls, the problem isn't necessarily with let's get on a video game and kill someone, it's let's get on Pinterest and create something. And so Pinterest has been a real struggle for Tally. She loves creating, she loves making things, and so I would say even with girls, be very, very diligent with what they're seeing, and just be very frank with everyone, and we're all grown up here. Pornography in the world of girls is growing rapidly, and so I think just letting our girls have these iPhones and just being free with them is a big mistake. We need to be very diligent with what our sweet little girls are watching and seeing. And so anyway, I would just say that while it doesn't look the same, girls do struggle with their friends and texting. And so my girls, while they don't have phones, if they get a hold of my phone, I get a little glimpse of what it could look like. So just for those of us who have girls, it's still a problem.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. Okay, so I only have 2 questions. And okay, this one says, aside from CC, what other curriculum do you use during foundations? And do you have a favorite math or language arts?
Easy. I use Susan Weiss Bauer's writing and spelling writing program. When they were little, I loved Matthew C. We used Matthew C. all the way up to Saxton. And once we started Essentials, language arts is complete and full in Essentials, so you don't need any other language arts program for Essentials. The mistake is to try to add some. I wouldn't if I were you. I think it is complete. So Susan Weiss Bauer up until 3rd grade, or up until, what did we have, 4th grade, and Matthew C. was our
Specifically math and English, is that the question?
Okay, so I don't have a lot of experience because my kids weren't in foundations and essentials very long. I do agree with Colleen about the English, absolutely. But when I need something, like they have a question or they're not getting something, now that they've moved out of foundations and essentials and they aren't doing essentials, what I go to is that our mother tongue that is a CC resource that's optional for essentials, but I have it and we use it now.
And my kids went through it during Essentials.
Right.
What was that again?
Our mother tongue, it's a blue book and it's not very thick, comes with an answer key. The exercises fit nicely with what they've already learned in essentials. That's what I go back to.
They have it in the bookstore.
Yeah, it's a CC. They recommend it along with Essentials as a resource, not as a curriculum.
But for Essentials.
4th through 6th.
And then math, we started out with teaching textbooks, which is done on the computer. Liked that fine, but we switched to Saxon when my kids started Challenge because I just wanted them to be in that program. So that's what we've done. Sometimes in the summer, though, my kids will do Life with Fred, which is more of a storybook format for math because it's still the concepts that it just feels simpler. Yeah, it's more fun. It's more fun. There you go.
And when did you say you switched from Matthew C. to Saxon?
Challenging.
And you don't have to
You don't have to,
switch, but we did.
Same reason. I just thought, let's look at math in a different way. Math is math. It's good to see it being taught different ways.
Let's see, we did Irish language lessons up until Essentials. There's another program called Analytical Grammar that I have as a reference that I'll pull sentences out of when I feel like, not necessarily my Essentials kid now, but my older kids if I think they need a little bit of help. They have some books that are high school level that there's like British authors, American history. So it's like real sentences from actual literature.
What is that called?
It's called Analytical Grammar. It's a full program. There's some correlation between Essentials, but I'd use Essentials solely if that works. We just use that sometimes. Let's see, math, we've used Saxon all the way. We started Saxon and that's all we've ever done, so I like it.
And I did forget one of my all-time favorite grammar programs before we started CC. So that 3rd grade year, like Lillian will be doing Rod and Staff 3rd grade year grammar.
We like
Love Rod and Staff. You're diagramming scripture. You're looking at scripture in a grammar.
It's Mennonite text.
Love it. Yeah, love it.
Yeah, I've heard of that. My older two, when we did Susan Weiss Bauer, that's what we did first was Rod and Staff.
That's good. Okay, the last question I have, I think we've already covered. So do y'all have any outstanding questions that we haven't talked about?
Back to the curriculum handwriting. In these early years, is copy work the way to go?
I did italics, copy work. Yeah. Okay. It's called italics.
There's a program, I think Memoria Press sells it. Of course, now CC has the
Prescripts.
Prescripts. But prior to that, I bought this program. It's called American Cursive. I liked it because it looked more boys, because my boys were hard to get them to learn cursive. But what I did, it's a program that you buy and you can make your own sentences. So what my foundation student does now is he does cursive from the history sentences. So that's another way that he learns his cursive writing. So prior to that, he did it print, but now with learning cursive, he does the sentence and he breaks it up. So I give him the sheet, I make the history sentence in cursive and have the lines down below. And if it's really long, he just breaks it up per day and has to have it done within a week. But it's been helpful to him to reinforce the sentence in his head as well.
And what program was that?
I think it's American Cursive. I bought it from, I believe it was Memoria Press. I've had it.
I think that is a Memoria.
Is it Memoria? I think it's a classical cursive. It's a little. To me, it combines like the old-fashioned cursive with more print.
Right.
Italics is very similar to that. The reason I went with italics, 12 years ago, or whenever italics started writing, is because you learn to print, and then instead of remember, you know how we have to relearn how to do a B. We have to, this just turn those letters right into your. And now I understand how we got our S, because it's italic. And anyway, because I was going for the same thing Janine was going for. I didn't want. It was so frustrating. Anyway, but they say now the cursive is so beneficial, and which is why they came out with the prescripts.
Does the prescripts actually teach them the basics of cursive?
If you start with the first one.
The first
one.
one. Yeah.
Yeah.
And those are good. I've looked at them.
Those are great.
I like them. They just, my son's passed where I guess.
Well, I have Tally
What
doing
age
the
are
oldest one because it relates to like American documents. And then I have Celine doing one that's I think hers is maybe medieval, because the writing progresses in difficulty, gets smaller and more as the books get older. But the beginning one is a very rudimentary. Yes, very rudimentary
What age
cursive.
would you?
Yeah, like my 7-year-old started with the earliest one.
But you said on the American Cursive that you can make your own sentence.
You can make, if you buy they have a program, and I think more than does actually too, but you have to order the CD. If you want the actual program written on your computer where you make your own sentences, you have to order that. But I think they have the books. And to learn the cursive, that I bought the first book for him, and that's how we learn the cursive. And the nice thing is you buy it one time, and you can like start off with big letters, and then now he's down to, he's going into 5th grade. So
I just want more writing practice, and anything that can make your own to give them more.
John, you have a question?
I just had a question. It kind of is back on the consequences versus positive affirmations at the younger ages. What kinds of things would you reward for? Because what kinds of things and what kinds of rewards would you use? Because I know, like now, they care about what their peers think, but when you're young, what kinds of things would you reward for?
well, something we did when my boys were all smaller, we did diligence dollars, and I made little. They got to. We got to every 6, or I did it every 4 weeks or whatever. They would earn diligence dollars for either doing a great job on their work or something around the house, or just however wanted to reward them. And then they would actually get to pick coupons. So they would each get to pick 3 things that they wanted on a coupon. So maybe it was go get dessert with dad, maybe it was 30 minutes of extra video time, or rent a movie, whatever they wanted. And then I put values on those. And so they had to use their diligence dollars to buy those coupons, and they would get to do that. I don't do it now, but but when they were little, I would say elementary school, and they loved it. They'll even talk about it now. Try to get diligence dollars. You do it because you love me now.
Right. Well, I'm going to have to admit to you, the last time I rewarded my children was with the poop box. If you sat on the potty and produced, we're getting a sticker. I don't reward. Maybe I'm not understanding what you're rewarding for. Schoolwork?
She's asking you what you reward.
Yeah.
Yes. I don't reward. I'm a non-rewarder.
That's why y'all didn't get candy.
I'm
I
a
walked in here and I'm like,
non-rewarder.
Colleen, where's the candy?
Right.
What are we talking?
You know, I was just so thrilled that we finished a book. Like maybe I was internalizing it too much. Like the fact that I was even able to teach my kids, that was so like exciting. And maybe I was so self-centered about it. Like, I'm awesome. You know what I mean? Like I didn't even think about maybe what the kids were doing. So to be completely honest with you, I never even considered rewarding them. Do I fail?
I think it depends a lot on the personality of your kid, because I have to tell you, my older one, I have to be real careful about what I reward him for, because then it becomes an expectation.
Yeah,
And so I can't, it's really hard for me to go there with him.
And it's the whole planning ahead. Like I struggle with the whole planning ahead thing. I mean, yeah.
And consistency with it.
The
too, I
consistency
think.
with it. You know what? I'm so bent on being consistent with like discipline and things that I feel are so important that maybe I've just got my plate full. You know what I mean? Just doing what other moms find easy. But yeah.
That's good. Anybody else got any other questions? You
I
got
just
another
have one more question
Go.
about the handwriting thing.
That's so funny.
Do you-
Good boys.
Do you think that it's necessary for them to master print before moving on to italics or cursive?
Do you have boys?
No, I have a girl and I have a 4-year-old boy, so he's
How
not.
old is your daughter?
She'll be 7, and we did this last year was her first official year to homeschool. And
I
so
just want to say, with your boy coming up, that I have found that the boys develop much more slowly. So if you get to that age, just be aware, at least in my experience, they cannot do the same things at the same age that the girls can do. So don't be frustrated or discouraged by that.
I have all boys, so handwriting, I would like it to be neater. My middle one writes with perfection. He came to that on his own. My youngest one writes really, really fast. He does lots of things fast. Cursive slows him down. It actually makes him write better. He actually likes it. He thinks it's kind of fun to do that. So I wouldn't say he had mastered print before we moved to cursive, because it's just another way of writing. And really I did it more so he's able to read it, to be able to read the cursive. But it's still developing, either way you're developing fine motor skills. And they'll develop, I've learned too with my kids, they develop a way of writing. I do, I don't write like I learned. You know, you pick up different ways.
And there's also, I don't know how many do this, but when I started homeschooling, I had all these moms that had gone before me, and so I would get a lot of their leftovers. And when I started my kids writing, we didn't even write. They did these exercises, maybe y'all seen them, where you literally do this all across the page. And so my kids would do that for, a couple of years before we even started the italics program. But I think what you're asking, I think people have written essays on this, and you probably could find, I'm serious, I think they've studied this. Is it the best? I'm not educated well enough. I can only go by my preference, and yes, I wanted my child to print well before we moved on to cursive. But they say now, especially if you've got a child with dyslexia, that cursive is going to benefit your child. So it seems like what they're saying is as soon as you can get them to cursive, go ahead and do that, because that helps them with that. The order, because then it's all this one.
Yeah. Is it a backup that starts cursive? I think there's a homeschool curriculum that starts them in cursive. I think it's a backup.
I don't know.
I think
But you'll have to probably go to more educated people on handwriting. I'm just being serious. I think they really do study that.
And I think it's your child too.
Yeah. Because I went on my own personal preference.
Because all of mine are different when you're handwriting.
Just wondering, if your child's a natural speller, is it still necessary to go through a spelling program so they learn all the spelling rules? Or
I think so, but if your kid is a natural speller and you wanting to really kind of skip the whole spelling thing, Lee Borton's in the Essentials program, like if your kid's really doing okay, and this is my opinion, don't write a book on what I'm about to tell you, and don't publish this, but what I would tell you, if you've got a kid that naturally spells well, I think they do need to know these phonics rules, they need to know their rules, but Lee Borton's has a very abbreviated spelling program in the Essentials Guide. So when you get to 4th grade, I would recommend that you do that. It's like the 1,000 most used words, and that's what she says when you, she totes it for that kid that can't spell well. And if you really are struggling with a spelling program, use this. This is sufficient. She really believes in what she's put in the back of that. But I might say that if I've got a kid that spells great, and I would rather have my kid reading a great book than, you know what I mean? But I do think the phonics rules are important.
That's it. My daughter is 6, and she goes around like spelling things all the time.
Lovely.
We have conversations about sure actually doesn't have an SH because you're E or whatever. But that's I've been trying to decide this year, is it necessary to buy a spelling program and go through, or can we wait and she'll get the rules eventually?
I don't have a great answer here. My concentration was always on, you know, if you go through the list of words, the ones that you already know how to spell, you don't really go over those again. And I do not concentrate much on the phonics rules. So I have one that's kind of a naturally good speller and one that has to work a lot harder on it. And, you know, so maybe I kind of dropped the ball and then I'm not sure I'm the best advisor in that area.
We did the spelling workout that Susan Watts Bowers recommends and the Well-Trained Mind. And I like that because it's more than a spelling program. It also helps with vocabulary development. You're still learning your, so if she's good and natural, you just move through the books faster. I mean, my youngest one is a natural speller, and he's on the 4th, or the level F with that. He's going into 6th grade, and he's going into 5th grade, so he's ahead.
So it's something
Because
they
he's
can
moved
just sit
through
down
it.
and work through on their own.
It can.
He does it really
Ideally with spelling workouts, that's what we did, but I dropped the ball on spelling workout because there is an oral part that you need to sit down and say the words, because to spell is not just a visual thing, it's an audio thing, visual, and it's a sequential exercise. And so I think the best program so I did workout, but it didn't work. So they did years and years of workout, but spelling workout, but I dropped the ball on it and then I wasn't doing my part, reading it aloud to them. So now my older two, and Lillian, I'm not going to do workout with her, I'm going straight to the Andrew Pudawa's spelling phonics zoo. Love it, because it's all on a DVD. They listen to the CD and they do it, and it's great.
So yeah, that's important. I think the audio, because
Yeah.
my oldest one who reads a lot, it's funny how many times he'll say words that he doesn't pronounce them. Another big long words, and I'll be like,
One of the things I wish I had known, which you mentioned Andrew Pudawa, reminded me, my kids were too old when I heard him say the spelling really should be more of an audio thing, because when you read a word, your brain doesn't store the letters in order, right? It can't. It stores them all together. And so when you hear it done audio and you spell out a word, then you're putting them in sequential order, the letters in sequential order in your head, which when you think about that, it makes a lot more sense. So I think my struggling speller would have done a lot better if I had known that when he was at the age to do more of the audio spelling.
Celine's doing it in the summertime. That's what we do in the summer. That's one of our summer schools, is phonics zoo. My older two.
Maybe I can borrow that for sure.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, so when I was putting this practicum together and I was told I had to do a mom's panel, you were the first 3 moms that came to my mind. And you all said yes. And so, what a gift. So thank y'all. I really respect each one of you and just the journey that you're on in your own homeschool and the way you love your families. And so thank y'all for taking way more time than I did. And I have something for you.